Peter Boghossian, we're here to talk about free speech.
Indeed.
We've been talking about free speech actually for a number of years now.
Yeah.
Somehow the message doesn't seem to spread.
Amazing, isn't it?
There are those who are fully committed to free speech, and we've got them on board.
True.
It's hard to win new converts. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a great question. So thanks to both of you to being here. I think people want free speech for their own ideas, but not other ideas. The Islamist wants free speech for his ideas.
Free speech for me, but not for thee.
Correct. Correct. So the question then becomes, is there a way, given that you're right, that these ideas have a very old pedigree, there's really nothing new there. Shermer wrote a book about it. Andrew Doyle wrote a book about it. I mean, lots of people have written books about it, but given that those things haven't persuaded, or they may have given people who are already adherents to free speech codes arguments for free speech, but they've not persuaded anybody new. The question is, what is a good way to persuade a neutral, independent person who is unsure?
So I'll tell you something that I hear a lot when I'm kind of just out and about talking about free speech issues, is people associate it now with being kind of like a right-wing enterprise.
Correct.
So where do you think that's come from?
It's a great
What do you think
question.
has kind of brought us to this point where people associate it with a particular kind of political matrix?
Well, I think that's true. It is. I mean, it was not always the case in the United States. And I just posted something on X. A woman and a man are in a car, and a woman says, "Why are you so politically right wing?" And the guy said, "I'm just a normal person from 1995."
Yeah.
Because the left has gone to crazy town, right? The left is, that's Colin Wright's diagram, the evolutionary biologist from Nashville. The left has gone to crazy town, and the right has more or less adopted some of the principles of the older in the United States context, the Democrats. And so that's one thing.
Although there are now elements of the right that are also going to crazy town.
Yeah, like the Groypers and Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson.
Those guys who think that, Churchill was the real villain of World War II, this kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
They've never seen the other guy.
Yeah. Well, apparently they have, and they quite like what they see.
They quite like him. Nick Fuentes and his ilk quite like him. But so the question is, if these arguments haven't worked, then what's going to work? Like, what's going to persuade a neutral, independent person who's sincere and just trying to work this stuff out, him or herself? And I think I have the answer to that. Error correction.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pitch it in terms of a value. Don't pitch it in terms of cognitive liberty, freedom.
Or some kind of fundamental right.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit about that. They only want it for themselves. They don't want it for other people. So that argument is going to get nowhere. But everybody, even the Islamic fundamentalist or any religious fundamentalist, in terms of, if you go back to Schleiermacher and Dilthey, they wanted to figure out if there were correct interpretations, canonical interpretations of religious texts. And so even the Islamic fundamentalist wants to correct his or her. They don't want to correct their worldview, but they want some kind of error correction for what they believe. So if you sell the idea in terms of, you do, as Reid always says, do not block the road of inquiry. Like, you have to, and free markets, democracy, all of those things, science, the whole body of science,
right.
It's all error correction. That's why, not to go down a rabbit hole, but I think this is so important. The replication crisis in psychology, economics, and other fields are so important. That's why the plagiarism crisis is so important. That's why the corruption of the peer review process is just of indispensable importance that be fixed immediately. And the wholesale ideological capture of our educational institutions. They've drifted from error correction and either towards Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, or they've drifted towards like teaching for equity, or teaching for kind of these weird arbitrary values that are not rationally derivable. But if you recenter it on error correction, I think that's the pitch.
I think you're exactly right.
I just think it's probably worth clarifying what we mean by error correction, right? So when you use that term, just for audience's sake, what do you mean by that?
The ability to correct mistakes.
We can think about science, for example. Karl Popper pointing out
Exactly.
that we can't actually prove anything to be true. So any given theory is going to contain errors. In order to correct those errors over time, we have to test the theory against reality.
Yeah.
Where it's found wanting, we modify the theory or replace it if necessary.
Yeah.
And I think it works similarly perhaps in a democracy.
Yeah, and it works in democratic systems. That's why I actually think, and I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, is true. I actually think it's a great thing that I mean, I think it's totally deranged, but I think it's a great thing that this lunatic is now the mayor of New York. I think that's great. Because now
You're talking about Mamdani for New Zealand listeners who may not know who that
sorry,
is.
Sorry. Because people need, in democratic systems, people need to take accountability and be responsible for their vote. That's why it's not an autocracy. You're a democracy and you vote, and there are consequences to your votes. And if you want to vote in a deranged man, or a man who wants to raise your taxes, et cetera, like now the CEO of Starbucks, who's in Seattle, who's championing all these social justice causes himself, is moving out of Seattle because they're increasing a wealth tax. So many blue states are putting in wealth taxes, and rich, like California, and rich people are fleeing to Florida and Texas where there's no state income tax. But my point is, you have to be responsible. That's what democracy is. It's about taking responsibility for the people for whom you're voting.
And having the opportunity to correct errors every so often by voting in a new election.
Yeah, and if you just say, well, this guy has bad ideas, we're going to denaturalize him. I mean, that's like crazy talk. People have to be given the opportunity to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Even though we know the consequences of this. We know the consequence. I wanted to bet on a poly market, but you can't bet in a poly market. I got this idea from Shermer. Shermer said, Michael Shermer from the Skeptic Society, don't tell anybody you're smart, make predictions. And then I took that to another level, make bets. So I'm now like betting on ideas. That's a way to show
My colleague
confidence.
Eric Crampton would like this very much. He likes the betting markets, especially as a way to kind of figure out what's likely to happen, because what you're doing is bringing together a whole lot of micro decisions made by tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, and if people are willing to put their own money
put their money up, then they've got some confidence in what they're saying.
Yeah, and so I think it's the most obvious thing in the world. They're going to, once the state of New York, I think the damage he's going to do to the city of New York will be limited, but I think it could end up being quite significant, particularly with the budgetary insolvencies and such. My bet was that he's explicitly going to blame that on the far right.
Right. Of
As
course.
opposed
Well,
to
you
take
need to
any
blame it on your opponents.
responsibility.
But if we do say that, a really good selling point for free speech is error correction, and I agree that it is, what are the conditions under which it can work? Because if we look at democracies around the world where theoretically we have this going on, UK, New Zealand, Australia, the United States, they all, give at least lip service to valuing free speech, right? And you've got it in your constitution and so on.
Us more,
Yeah. But the point being that it all seems to be breaking down everywhere. The error correction is no longer working. And perhaps because people vote and yet nothing changes. So they're not actually getting what they voted for.
Just integrating something else into that I have been hearing that, is often something that I hear as kind of a rebuke to the free speech idea is, but free speech has consequences, right?
Okay.
So I just wonder if
free speech isn't freedom from consequences.
yeah, exactly. But it seems
okay.
to be this idea that, free speech means that there's no consequences for your actions. And I think that's one of the kind of misnomers that's floating around.
Yeah, if I carry was that Bruce Willis movie where you carry the sign with the N-word on it in New York City, like if you want to do something like that, I mean, I personally believe people should be able to burn the Quran. I think it's very ill-advised, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do it. In fact, I'd recommend you not do that.
Or the American flag.
Or the American, but Trump doesn't want the American. He wants and I disagree with him vehemently on that. Trump wants a legal penalty for burning the American flag. I think that's wrong. So that's another example of where the rights fail. But so, getting back to error correction. So tell me if this is boring, because I think it's to really explain this. I think we need some infrastructure. So I think it was in '76, Dawkins put out The Selfish Gene. So a gene is
selfish genes and selfish memes.
Yeah, so a gene is well, it's a selfish gene. It's like a he coined the frame meme, and so that's a cultural unit of information, and so memes propagate in one of two ways. There are good memes and bad memes, and there are methods of allowing a meme to spread and methods of containing a meme. So like blasphemy laws contain memes. Political correctness is a meme containment mechanism. And anything in the last 15 years that universities have done are pretty much designed to contain memes. So there's a sticky meme. A sticky meme is a meme that sticks or spreads throughout society.
That goes viral.
Yeah, that goes viral. And there's this thing called the 3.5% rule. So we think about it in terms of like a bunch of people stacked up. P.F. Jung has great work on this. I highly recommend it. So we think in terms of the 3% rule of being, if you have 100 people, 3%, and then the meme goes. But a better way to think about the transmission, the mimetic transmission of ideas, is to think about it as a contagion, like a plague. And so there are just people everywhere, and then random people have this idea, or they're just somehow distributed in this mass distribution. And then when you get to a certain number, then the meme spreads. Now, a good, like science is a good meme. Science is a good meme because it has the built-in method.
Is it a meme itself, or is it a means of propagating memes?
It's a means of a method of propagating memes. So science, you have error correction in that. Bad memes flourish when you disable the method of error correction. Like many religions have bad memes because you can't criticize those things, and so then that's how they spread.
Just to come back to your contention that things like blasphemy laws or, say, hate speech laws suppress bad memes.
Yeah.
I'd actually dispute that a bit. I think what they do, they might contain them for a while, but because they're no longer flowing through the system and being subject to error correction in an open way, they actually pathologize. So people don't stop believing what they believe just because you have a blasphemy law that says that you're not allowed to say that, the prophet is a donkey or something like that.
Just curious, while you're talking about what makes a bad meme.
Yeah.
So who determines what a bad meme is? Is that, we're seeing a growing kind of prominence of concepts of misinformation, disinformation. Is there an overlay there?
Yeah, bad memes haven't been subject to error correction.
Yeah. So is that the same as misinformation? Is misinformation just information that hasn't
I don't think it would be, because the term misinformation is usually used by authoritarian figures wanting to control information flow. In other words, they want to prevent error correction, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm getting at, because misinformation is also like a kind of architecture that aims to control the information flow of what is allowed to be talked about and what's not, right, and how it gets talked about. So I'm just wondering if there's a relationship there between that and bad memes.
Yeah, it's interesting. And if you mentioned architecture, and certain platforms like X have community notes, so they try to allow the community, and then you can vote on those notes. And I'm sure they can be gamed. I don't know how one would game it, bots or something. I don't know, but I'm sure it can be gamed. But that's the idea. Is that in science, for example, ideas are like Popperian you mentioned. You try to falsify the ideas. You don't forward the ideas. Like you don't, anything that ends in studies does. You see this all the time. They just forward these. They have narratives. That's the point of their journals.
And they call them theories to give them the imprimatur of science.
Exactly. But they have not been subject to error correction. They have a kind of ersatz error correction with the whole peer review process. But that whole process itself is designed to forward those ideas.
It's more subjecting it to ideological tests by a priesthood than it is testing it against reality.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And so that's a good idea, or a good meme, or a bad meme. It's not necessarily that it's tricky to think like that. But if you just Occam's razor that are just don't have your ontology bloated by a proliferation of ideas, just think about it in terms of error correction. Like if it's been subject to sincere, genuine peer review by experts in the field who are trying to falsify it, and it continues to survive, like when a hypothesis becomes a theory, then it survived the method of error correction, then we can apply the label good. If it has not, if the method of error correction has been removed from it, and you're not allowed to criticize the idea, like Black Lives Matter or whatever, equity or every distribution of systems or whatever the craziness
sacred
is.
ideas.
Yeah, sacred ideas. Sacred ideas would be great. Some guy once told me that the holy city of someplace, and I laughed. I didn't mean to laugh. Such a stupid idea. But once you start saying a thing is sacred or holy, you've disabled the method of error correction, so you can't criticize it. So then it spreads. So then everyone's like, "Oh, this is the holy city," and enough people believe it because no one can criticize it.
Yeah, which doesn't make it any more true. It just means that
no, and exactly that's why we have a significant number of people who are living lives of total delusion.
Yeah,
I'm very interested in this analogy that you're drawing between error correction in science and error correction in society at large.
Yeah.
And if we think again of Popper for a minute, he described a kind of normal method of conducting science whereby somebody has a theory, they derive hypotheses from that theory, test them with experiments, and then correct the theory where necessary. And over time, the theory then develops. But then we had Kuhn, who came along and pointed out that from time to time, not normally, but from time to time, the theoretical apparatus is in such disrepair that it gets wholesale replaced. And the classic example is Copernicus, positing that the Earth is not the center of the universe, that actually the Earth revolves around the sun. And that was a whole different paradigm, as Kuhn would put it, a paradigm shift. Do we have a similar thing happening in society at large where a social paradigm has outlived its ability to cope with the conditions in which people are living, and then you get a kind of revolution? Would that be an analogy to the paradigm shift in science?
Yeah, it would. What's interesting is that if the continuation from Kuhn is Feyerabend, right? This idea that this like
at
really
which point
postmodern.
I think he lost the plot completely.
Yeah, I think he lost the plot too. But I'm taking that idea and then I'm reapplying it here. You have these, I would say, Helen Pluckrose calls it applied postmodernism. You basically have these people who have more or less Feyerabendy type postmodern views. So it's to take what you said, those people still have tenure and control of the institutions. And remember, everything is downstream of the academy. The media is downstream of the academy. Politics are downstream. It's all downstream of the academy. The academy is the wellspring. It's the flow where all this stuff comes. So maybe those theories don't operationalize in terms of how the efficacy in people's lives. But the same people are in those positions propagating the same idiocy. It's totally untethered to reality. All of it.
Right. Yeah.
And this is why academic freedom and academics actually having that ability to kind of go against the grain is so important, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've interrupted your flow.
No. I'm just thinking like that's why we need institutions that have the utmost integrity.
Yeah.
And when you keep people on an institution who have obtained their credentials fraudulently, like Claudine Gay, who was a serial gangster plagiarist.
She was the president of Harvard University at one point.
She's a gangster plagiarist. It's not like she took a line or a few words. Who cares?
Almost her whole opus.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty striking, and even her acknowledgments. And the institutions become delegitimized when you retain people like that. And remember for the Claudine Gay case, one of the things that makes it so interesting is that she was found innocent of plagiarism before she even had a trial because she was black.
Yep. Yeah. Although the person that she plagiarized from was also
black, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is that's not only is that corrosive to the trust in societies, but that whole system is a way to propagate bad memes. Because, and look what she did to Roland Fryer, who was black, who came out with, I don't know if you're familiar with Roland Fryer's work, but fascinating stuff about, blacks roughed up in custody or shot by the police, by other blacks or by whites or what have you. But when people don't like those conclusions, she went on a jihad, her own private jihad. But the idea there is that Roland Fryer's work should have been subject to the normal method of scrutiny of error correction, but it wasn't. So you tried to suppress data and evidence through ideology, and she had the political power and the race of her skin to do so, even though Fryer was black. And she was successful in that, and Harvard as an institution has beclowned itself.
Until she wasn't.
No, well, I mean, it depends what you mean. She's still drawing $900,000 a year. She lost her position as president, but she's still full professor.
Right.
$900,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's crazy money.
Yeah, that is crazy.
And she works like not at all. Those people have cake jobs.
Well, and also just the consequences. We were talking earlier about consequences, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you the consequences. I'll tell you a consequence of this. One consequence from this is, it seems like it's far afield, but it's not far afield. The whole idea of peer review is to act as like a sieve. Like it's to act.
Yeah. But again, that only works if the people conducting the peer review have truth as their guiding light, rather than an ideology that. So if you're testing the idea that's being put forward in a paper against reality and evidence, then you get that kind of sieve.
So
if you're testing it against an ideology, then all you get is conformity.
Even now, there is a great article in the Free Press, and there's been a lot of the Alzheimer's research has been totally fabricated.
Yep, it has.
So
well, there was one guy who apparently
there was one guy. There's one guy who's responsible for fabricating, and there's image fabrication. But anyway, all of those things. So that's the thing that's so crazy to me. It's like nobody talks about this. Like everybody should be talking about this. This is a huge. All of our. I sound like a postmodernist, but I'm not. This is not where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not advocating that all knowledge is relative and then no standards to judge. I'm saying it's like we need to rethink how we evaluate ideas and how those ideas percolate through systems that we've created, academic institutions, journals, peer review. But we haven't done that, and now with AI, it's completely hopeless.
We have to be really careful to distinguish between Popper's insight that we can't know anything for sure, and the idea of relativism, which is that anything goes.
That's correct.
Because for Popper, everything does not go.
Right.
It only goes if you can test it and fail to falsify it. Right.
Well, many of the things in the studies there are, and look, it's not as if, I don't want to say, because you mentioned academic freedom, or you mentioned, I don't want to sit here and say, look, if you write in literature interpretation of like plays or something, there's a necessarily right or wrong answer. Maybe there's. I don't know if you want to say that it's like everybody should eat hamburgers.
It's a different
read
thing than
Macbeth
science
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're still faced with the fundamental idea that if the method of error correction is disabled or if it's somehow been corrupted, then people will unknowingly believe false things.
Yes.
You cannot escape that.
And institutionally, perhaps there are two ways that we can think about it going wrong. One we've already discussed, which is the failure of the disposition to test ideas and a move towards the idea of the institution being to promulgate social justice or something like that, rather than to discover truth. Yeah. But the other one, which I think our universities also suffer from, is when all of the people in the institution are up one end of a political spectrum.
Correct.
And then you also lose the ability, even if they were all well motivated and had the right disposition, they don't have their ideas tested rigorously because there's no one outside their echo chamber to do it.
Yeah, that's Mill.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the question is, how do we reinstitutionalize trust? How do we restore the method of error correction? You might not like my answer. I don't think we can. I think we have to burn the whole thing to the ground. Every time I say that, people say, oh no, you don't literally mean burn it. No, fucking burn it all down.
So say we did burn them all down. How are we going to regrow them when it's taken hundreds of years for the current university to evolve through a fairly complex cultural interaction?
I think that the university, by and large, will be a thing of the past. And I don't think people are, and certainly I'm not the only one who said this, but I don't think people are ready for the singularity. I don't think they're ready for what's to come at all.
What do you mean by the singularity? I've got questions, but what do you mean by the singularity?
Just the point by which people could not imagine what comes after it. I think Kurzweil is like a symphony to earthworms, or there are different versions of the singularity. Like but that's
So profound change to the extent that
Yeah.
people can't possibly
so
predict the extent of the change.
the
kind of thing.
exponential curves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have multiple independent factors operating at the same time now.
So are you talking about new error correction mechanisms that spring up from technological sources that enable us to, or that enable the testing of ideas in new ways that will render the university's model redundant?
No, because I think there's a tremendous danger when we outsource our thinking and our error correction to LLMs.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So when you say that the universities will pass away and be replaced with,
Hopefully,
something in this singularity zone, what do you mean?
Well, nobody knows what that.
We don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, we can hypothesize.
So in other words,
individual agents, tutors with.
But if you're arguing, to actively burn the universities down, to defund them, to get rid of them, then we create a wasteland. But there's no guarantee that anything will take their place that's any good, because that space could just be filled with LLMs.
But if 70, okay, so let's say that's true. Just accept by fiat your argument that's true. If it is true, and we can have a conversation about this. You don't have to accept this by fiat, but if it's true that over 50% of the papers in psychology cannot be replicated, well, I think the number is 70 the last time I looked. And if it's true that over 70% of the papers in economics cannot be replicated, then that's worse than a coin flip.
I agree.
You're teaching people things that are false. So
the solution to that is relatively straightforward. When I was trained, we weren't allowed to publish until we got a replication.
No. So this is our disagreement. It is better to look at a wall than it is to learn false things.
Agreed.
It is better to burn the institutions down that are teaching things that are false. And this isn't me saying that they're saying that they're false. Yeah. So I'm not on
at the point. What I'm saying is the replication crisis in science, at least, can be solved by insisting that scientists get replications before they publish.
Well, there are many ways to solve it. One way to solve it is to agree, journals to agree that they'll publish independent of what the conclusion of the study. So, I mean, there are many, many ways to. The other way is you have to have an actual punishment for people who plagiarize.
Yeah.
What's that different issue?
No, but it's all related to the integrity of the system and the institution and error correction. They're all related to each other.
They're all related, but plagiarism is one problem, replication is another.
They're correct.
Yeah. But ideological capture is, another thing again.
Right. So we're better off not having institutions that teach people false things by people who have obtained their credentials fraudulently, which is plagiarism, or 4.5% of images now in scientific journals, they estimate are plagiarized. I estimate 15% of all papers are plagiarized. I estimate 0.2% of all people have degrees from, bogus, zero in the Ivies, but bogus diploma mills. So
with that stunt you pulled with Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay, you could do that in 5 minutes now with AI.
Right. Wait to see what's coming next. That's nothing. But my larger point to you is that we're better off not having these institutions than having them and credentialing people in things that are demonstrably false.
So I just want to jump in because I think the situation, absolutely go for it. The situation I think in New Zealand, the situation in New Zealand is a lot better, I think, than the situation that you've got going in the States. So I think, I hear what you're saying about the States, and I don't know that I'd argue with you about the States, but I think we've got a very different kind of a thing going here. There have been significant steps towards, I think, restoring kind of the integrity of the institution here.
You're talking about the academic freedom legislation?
Yeah, that's part of it. But also just internal transformations that we see going on at the moment. I think there is cause for hope. And something that really comes to mind as part of the conversation is a distinction that Jonathan Haidt made back in 2015 or 16, which I thought was really insightful about how ultimately institutions can only have one guiding goal. Ultimately, it comes down to one thing, right? And he said, exactly, yeah. Is the telos of the university ultimately going to be truth-seeking, or is it going to be social justice? And he said institutions that fail to actually make a decision about that internally will become completely incoherent and will ultimately collapse. And the ones who actually make a decision to kind of take that truth-seeking mission as their core principle they'll be the ones that survive. And I think there are pockets where that's happening in New Zealand, but I don't know that that's
I
the
hope
case
he's
in the
right about
States.
that. But what concerns me is that, I mean, you were talking before about the madrasa and the imams. In any religion, actually, religions survive and they suppress truth seeking in order to maintain their perspectives and to maintain their grips on their population. It seems to me, I mean, I think you're right that New Zealand universities have more of a chance, and perhaps because we're a small society where communication is relatively straightforward, but across kind of hierarchical levels. But there's still something for universities here to confront. They haven't yet perhaps let go
Yeah.
of certain ideological commitments, and I'd say they're just as ideologically skewed as any universities in the United States.
Many of them are, yeah.
Yes, that you can have people stand up and say, I think Matamangawari is bullshit. I think the Treaty of Waitangi is bullshit. I think it's based on a lie. These are testable things. You can say, I think people were born in different, subject to different evolutionary pressures, have different IQs, and you'll see what happens. And if nothing happens, then I'll be the first one to stand up and say, you know what? You're far more advanced than we are, and I'm wrong.
Or if what happens if SP to stand up and test those ideas with evidence rather than trying to censor that.
Like Larry Sumner, former president of Harvard, when he made those
Comments about female mathematicians.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that was a benign comment, but again, these are testable hypotheses. I'm not, I mean, even little things like people would say to me, you know, oh my God, you know, if you're seen with Kendall, who was one of the guys who's a buddy of mine, you know, he wrote the listener letter is like the most tame.
It's extremely carefully phrased.
Yeah, like I would have come down with 50 sledgehammers on that thing. But those guys were so nice and so
Well, they're Kiwis.
New Zealand. I know. So it was so New Zealand. So, and look at all the shit those guys got for that. I mean, they were like tormented for years for that. But you can test that hypothesis, and I don't know enough about it.
But you know what? I think there's something in what Steph is saying that is almost proven by that listener letter episode as it played out over the successive years. Because you're right, at the time they got slammed. Now, there were people like me and James Kierstead who immediately stepped into the breach to defend them when they were being attacked by just about everybody. Not many of us did that at the time. But those of us who did, we actually got drawn into a little cadre of people who really started to worry about the state of our universities. The Free Speech Union got a lot of
energy. Sponsored my trip here.
Who sponsored your trip here and many other good trips from really interesting people from around the world. Pinker.
James Lindsay, who you mentioned before.
So if we go back to that listener letter episode, I think it's actually a good example of error correction in action. It was very unpleasant to people concerned at the time. They got attacked by just about everybody. There were a few of us, like James Kierstead and I, who stood up for them immediately. And over time, more and more people started to accrete around us who helped, and the Free Speech Union got involved. And then the ACT Party put up this academic freedom legislation, and now that's been passed. Right. And so you could argue that actually, while it was awful for the Listener 7, it led to good things over time and maybe helped course correct where New Zealand universities were headed. Yeah. We haven't won yet, let me hasten to add, by any means. Yeah. But it is an error correction kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think that's great. So in that case, assuming that's true, the system has functioned how it should.
Yeah.
To an extent, I wouldn't say. Yeah.
But so we've. I put myself broadly in this. I don't even know why I say we've, but we've preserved the method of error. I'm a Kiwi now.
You are. You're part of it.
The North Island.
Welcome here in
North Island, not the South Island.
We're delighted to have you here on the island.
Thank you. I love this. I don't feel downgraded from coming from a continent, but so the method of error correction has been preserved here, then, right? So
to some extent, at least. Yeah. I think it's. We'll see how it plays out over the next few years. But
I think this is a kind of choice point in that respect. So I think we'll see, right, out of the legislation that we've got coming through, I think the listener letter was a kind of key contributor to the signals that things were going wrong in universities. And so the legislation is directly in response to some of the issues that have come up out of academic freedom. So we'll see now, with the legislation in place, how universities respond to it. And I think that will signal to us whether they're actually going to kind of course correct back in the direction of truth seeking, or whether they're going to take a different path.
So to borrow religious language, in that case, it would be redemptive. But the United States has no redemption.
I think perhaps the difference is, like, if we use a shipping analogy, New Zealand is a little yacht, and we can, tack on a dime just about. Whereas America is an ocean liner. It's a massive kind of beast, and turning it round may be impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's impossible because of the way we've set up the system, which was supposed to protect people if when they got tenure they could say what they want. But I think it's very similar to Islam, actually. It's very similar to submission. You go to try to get tenure, you go to assistant professor, you be a good boy or girl for 7 years, then you get it, and then you be a good boy or girl for 7 more years. And by that time, you've inculcated the value of submission in yourself.
You're now part of the priesthood. You've done your rituals of submission, as you say.
Yeah, and that's why these people could never be, by and large, public intellectuals. They could never move in the public space. They have submitted themselves voluntarily and willfully to become mouthpieces of the orthodoxy because they want to be promoted. They want to get the goodies, the raise, the job. And basically they're intellectual disgraces. All of them, like literally all of them. All of the people except, which was super interesting, like the people who stuck up for me, all of those people were at the top of the game. All of them. Extraordinarily high H indexes, like highest in the world. Those people are untouchable. But everybody else, or people would, whisper to me on the street something. Keep it up. That's just really good. Well, why don't you say something? No,
I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
No, I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this. How at every stage of the process, there are disincentives to speak up.
Correct.
Those who are just getting started, of course, it would be suicide if they were to go against the orthodoxy. Their careers would be trashed before they start.
Right.
And then you've got the ones who are kind of mid-career and they want to make full professor and all of that. And so they keep their mouths shut. And then by the time you're at the top, well, you've drunk the Kool-Aid to the extent that you're not going to say anything anyway.
And then you're all in. Yeah. Peter Singer from Australia, the ethicist, tried to make this journal of controversial ideas.
I remember it.
Yeah, I read it. I didn't think it was anything.
We used to have a conference of controversial ideas as well. Conference of dangerous ideas.
Yeah. But I don't think it's possible, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't think it's possible to recapture that. But I think our window is gone now because AI can write those things, and I think we're in the beginning of a revolution. And the other thing is that those institutions haven't kept up. They haven't changed the promotion and tenure basket to weigh items differently. And how are you going to judge if someone is an expert in their field where they can literally sit down with a martini and crank out 50 to 60 peer-reviewed papers in a day? And there's other programs like Stealth GPT that writes you don't even have to edit them.
Right.
It writes papers in a way that AI can't detect the papers, so you don't even have to plagiarize anymore. So, but the institutions haven't kept up with that. And it's pretty simple. Like, they haven't kept up with that pedagogically. They haven't kept up with that in terms of, like, what qualifies as an expert. And I'm glad they haven't, because they've done this to themselves. I mean, these things are really not grade inflation. Like, the solutions to these things are not complicated. But they're like, back to what you said, I think it's like you're trying to move this crazy, it's like a mega, it's not even an ocean liner. It's like the biggest ship you could think of in science fiction with a tiny tugboat. And the tugboat, everybody on the tugboat is like disagreeing with each other. And then another tugboat comes, they want to tug it the other direction. And they're trying to, this behemoth is sitting in the water, and they got to...
Meanwhile, the iceberg is looming.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the iceberg is looming, and people are like, well, well, good, you get what you deserve. Ruin. I mean, they do. They deserve ruin. Of course they deserve ruin. They're teaching people false things. They're completely divorced from reality. They're totally ideological. They skew on one side of the spectrum. They don't promote truth. They've withheld the method of error correction. Of course they deserve to fail.
So do institutions always decay like this? I think of Thomas Piketty's term, the Brahmin left, which I particularly like, even though...
I picked that up from you.
Even though Piketty is a Marxist. I really like that term, because we can think about the left in general 100 years ago... agree with it or not, it was fighting for the working person. It was very, very much into genuine social justice, not the crap that they promulgate now. But over time, that political movement got captured by the educated classes to the extent that now it really is a priesthood. And as you say, they do teach falsehood, and they do it to prop up their own privilege, which is a term that they love to use and throw around at others. But
it's like Rob Henderson's idea of a luxury belief.
exactly.
These people all have luxury beliefs. Voting
Absolutely.
for Mondami is a luxury belief.
For sure. It was a luxury action. Although how much luxury is left in 3 years' time, we'll see. But
Well, good. And good. And they get what they deserve. Just no federal bailout. You vote for anybody you want to vote for. But Uncle Sam isn't, you know what Uncle Sam means when I say that? Like the U.S. Yeah. Uncle Sam is, what, do you have an analog to Uncle Sam over here? Is it Uncle like?
Not really. We
know
don't
if we have
personify our
one.
country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the federal government shouldn't step in to bail you out. But you're free to vote for anybody you want.
But they almost always do when a big institution fails. You can think back to 2008 when
Yeah,
all the big banks, you know.
Well, I don't think Bush, that injected financial irregularity and non-predictiveness into the markets. But I don't, so that's the thing. I don't think that even if somehow you could save our academic institutions, why would you?
So you paint a
What would
pretty
the point
bleak
be?
picture. You say maybe things can be rebuilt. What can those of us who want to see good error correction mechanisms, especially those of us who come perhaps from the academy, which includes both of us, we both bailed on our own terms, but you know, other people have been cancelled and thrown out. People very close to me have been thrown out for very bad reasons. What can we do about it?
Great question. This is the easiest thing in the world that I'm going to ask people to do. It's the easiest thing in the world. In fact, this is an effortless ask. Stop giving money to your alma mater.
I don't give any.
Oh, good. So then you've succeeded already.
Hey, I'd like to do a bit more than that.
Well, okay, well, that's step one.
Like if we're taking a New Zealand context and thinking, okay, there is kind of hope for recovery here, and there's hope for kind of coming back on course.
But why would you want to help the people recovered who inflicted damage on people like the listener 7? You would only do that under one strict condition, in which those people made a very public apology. I'm sorry, I treated Kendall this way, I treated Elizabeth this way, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We were beholden to a dangerous exogenous ideology. We will not do it again. Here are the steps that we're going to take to prevent this from happening. Until that happens, nothing. You burn.
But, you know,
fucking burn all of it down.
Kendall, Elizabeth, Doug, Garth, they're all still employees of the university. And they want to save it. They're still there.
Well, good. They can work to save it. I'm going to work to burn it down. Oh, good for them. Well, I guess we're at odds. We have a genuine difference of opinion.
Yeah.
But my ability to burn things down here is a fraction of what it is in my own country.
But so coming back to the kind of error correction.
Can I just say one more thing first? You know what this is analogous to? It is analogous to the surgeons who mutilated the genitals of little kids.
We're mutilating the minds of young people in a similar way.
Have they said, I'm sorry, we made a mistake? No.
Sooner or
Has
later
any
they'll get sued,
institution, well, good, that's the only way. I mean, the postmodernists got that right. It's about power. Have any of these people come around and said, holy shit, what have we done? We've given puberty blockers to kids. We've made them lifelong medical patients. They can never have an orgasm. They can, no, they've not done it.
They have not.
Yeah.
No.
So this comes back to your point about integrity, right?
Yeah,
it's
there's
like
no,
when you realize you've
those
made a
systems
mistake.
should not be trusted. They they are not worthy of our trust, of the public trust. They have betrayed, in the case of the gender surgery, in the most egregious of ways possible. They have harmed children intentionally. They get no trust. I don't want to save them. They shouldn't be saved. They are complicit in what makes Tuskegee look like nothing.
I completely hear you, but here's the thing. I think we have to distinguish between the people who are culpable, and they should absolutely be held to account.
But they won't be.
And they probably won't be. Yeah. Let's put that to one side for a minute and think about the institution itself and come back to the kind of overarching theme of this conversation, which is error correction.
Right.
And it seems to me that you're arguing a Kuhnian case, that the paradigm is dead.
Correct.
And so it has to be replaced with something new. And actually, we don't know what yet.
Wait, I have to interrupt you. Unless the people in the upper echelon of the administrations universally
apologize.
Not only apologize, and not only say, I was wrong, I was complicit, I made a mistake, but lay out exactly what they're going to do in the future to preserve the method of error correction and not show that they've been hostage to the morally fashionable. Until they can do that, you're burning.
Yeah. Let me make a more Popperian argument.
Okay.
That actually we have a chance, an opportunity to save the model, at least in New Zealand. I'm not going to defend what's happening in America, and it may well be that it's a lost cause there. But here we have this academic freedom legislation in place. Maybe we should give that a chance to see if it can work. But I think there are some other problems. You know, you have talked a lot, and I agree with you, that one of the fatal things for universities has been the advent of postmodernism and the way in which it's destroyed the idea of truth-seeking completely.
Correct.
I think another problem that we've had in this country, and it's a little bit different than the US because you had different funding models for a really long time, but the way it works in New Zealand is that all the universities are essentially public funded.
Right.
Now, from the 1980s, a decision was taken that we needed far more people with degrees. And as a result, we went from something like 10% of the population studying at university to well over a third with university degrees. Inevitably, that pushed standards down. But the other thing it did was essentially turn students into customers. And so now we've got this model where you mustn't offend students ever, because if you do, well, it's the same as offending your customer. And maybe they'll take their money to a different university. My view is that we can fix the funding model and the standards at the same time, and potentially fix the ideological problem as well. So what I would do if I was Minister of Universities in New Zealand is cap enrolments at about 15 to 20% of school leavers, no more than that. And they get the money to educate that many and no more. Now the universities have to make choices about first of all, who are they going to take?
Yeah, but doesn't that presuppose that there's a meritocratic admissions process?
I would force them to have one. I'd say you are not allowed to have interviews or take into account their race or their sex or anything else.
People have tried that in the United States. It's failed. Only the University of Austin succeeded. You know how it has succeeded?
How?
There's one simple number to get in, and that's your standardized test score.
Right, and that is precisely what
prizes or won.
It's precisely what I'd make them use here. I'd say you will not get any funding unless you use only the grade average from the final year at school.
Now we agree.
And that's it. That's it.
No racial.
So your funding is capped at this many.
Totally.
And not only that, you're not allowed to teach professional programs anymore. We're going to have a medical college and a law college, which are external to the university, run by lawyers and doctors and so on. They do the professional training. The job of the university is to teach science and do research in science, and teach humanities and do research in humanities. And that's it.
Well, first of all, that seems very common sense to me. It doesn't seem anything radical, but here's my question to you.
It's pretty radical surgery on the system we've got now.
Well, I was going to say, it doesn't seem radical to my ears in terms of one ought not to do this because you're committing some kind of terrible breach. But is the idea that you just espoused considered to be a right-wing idea?
That's a good question. I mean, actually, possibly not, in as much as I would also say that we should pay a greater proportion of the fees of the kids who go to university from the public purse, because I think it's an investment in the future. And I don't want family background to be a barrier to...
I love that idea, by the way.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
So in that sense, it's a little more socialist even, but...
because the meritocratic...
Yeah, and I don't see why it should be perceived to be a right-wing idea, because what I'm trying to do is restore the balance of the university so that it's neither left nor right-wing, but it's simply about testing truth.
Yeah, I guess I love that idea. I guess one of the questions I have is, I'm told that it's not as bad as in the U.S., but the professoriate leans to the left overwhelmingly.
Vastly, yeah.
So you have to have some kind of plurality. What? Go ahead, you're going to say.
Well, I was just thinking about, I think there have been some situations that have happened here recently that have shown a Senate that's actually, makes decisions in a way that I think you probably agree are pretty common sense. So, like, an example that I can think of is at the University of Auckland. So, universities are actually organised and governed differently in New Zealand, and so I think this really shows up why the Senate and having a Senate in a university is a good idea, because the Senate of the University of Auckland is made up of the professoriate, right? And they had a situation where they've been working for around about 5 years on a freedom of expression and academic freedom statement, which would then inform a policy. And the Senate actually voted down last year one that had been tabled to them by their senior leadership team. So they put in front of the Senate this proposition for what a statement would look like. And the Senate voted it down substantially. And so it didn't actually end up getting passed. And so it went back to the drawing board. And they have just recently, I think about a month or 6 weeks ago, they've just ratified a new statement that is much more, I would consider, in line with academic freedom principles. And that was almost unanimously voted in by the professoriate. So actually they've kind of been acting almost like an error correction mechanism to prevent things going through that would actually contravene their academic freedom.
I like that, but one thing that's been percolating in my brain here is something you said, that if all the institutions here are public, wouldn't an error correction mechanism in terms of a filtration process for who goes to what school where be injected into the system if there were some private universities as well?
I think that would be a welcome addition to the New Zealand ecosystem. I'm just not sure that we have the kind of financial input to make that happen. It's not clear who would start a private university.
The people on the island are poor.
Well, there are some rich people here, but I mean, if you take Australia, they've got a couple of private universities started by ultra millionaires back in the 1980s and 90s mostly. It hasn't happened in New Zealand yet. So I'm not sure that private money is realistically going to enter the scene.
You know, it's interesting. I won't name his name, but last time I was on tour in Australia, Reed and I were going around with one of the guys who sponsored the tour, and he was talking about enrollment plummeting there. And that was, I don't know, like 2 years ago, I can't remember. But it's interesting here, when we went to that meeting, they said enrollment is high. And I had mentioned something, so this will tell you that not the Anglosphere is not all the same. And so I said, well, why don't you try to get like celebrity academics? At that time, Peterson was at his height, and there are all these, you know, you mentioned Jonathan Haidt, there are all these people, John McWhorter, et cetera. There are Glenn Lowry, there are celebrity academics. And he said, no, that would never work here. And I said, really, why? He said, because our principal customers are the Chinese. They don't give a shit about celebrity academics. They want rankings, public
That's
rankings.
a very good point. New Zealand and I would say Australian and probably Canadian universities are very addicted to the funding that comes with overseas students because they charge full fees.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
And you can see them when you walk around.
But look, they're going to have to get over that addiction because already there are quality universities being built throughout Asia. Sooner or later, the Indians will do the same, and then we just won't get those students anymore.
And I, you know, look, bring back to error correction. I think we can all agree that error correction is good. I think it's a much easier to sell than liberty, than freedom, than truth even. I think error correction is a very neutral term that people can latch onto. And there are things in every country, you know, like I was talking to someone in the Chinese educational system, and they were telling me that you can't say any, they have things that you can't talk about, taboos, forbidden topics, topics that cannot be evaluated, like the Uyghurs is big, one of the things.
Yeah, a lot in China.
Yeah. But for as an example,
the CCP.
So as an example.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking of all the examples of, you know, China is not a state or whatever. But anyway, so I think that the problem is that you need some kind of, as Loftus says, an outsider test for this. You need a test thinking like, well, I understand that in China they have this, but we need to be able to correct everything. So we need to give up our sacred cows. Do you have that expression here?
Oh, yeah.
We need to be able to give up our sacred cows, but nobody's willing to give up their sacred cows. So you don't even say the word sacred. You just, again, the framing of the whole thing is error correction, and it's literally institutionalized, and you need to enshrine that some way in some kind of institutional constitution, some way that if there's ever a question, it's easily adjudicated by an outside observer.
Yeah.
And if you do that without talking about any values, because error correction isn't really a value, right? Whereas liberty, freedom.
Error correction isn't a value in itself, but there is a set of values that uphold it. And what I mean by that, you know, I mean, you and I are a very similar age, and we grew up in the 1980s and 90s, and I would say that was a time when discussing outrageous things was kind of fun and celebrated. You could say anything. You could say literally anything as a comedian and get away with it. You could say most things as just an ordinary person in the street and get away with it. And it was even kind of cool and edgy to say the most crazy, outrageous things. Whereas now, you know, the culture has shifted in a way that makes that much more difficult. And that, I mean, that culture that we were lucky to experience as young guys is, I would say, a precondition for the most efficient error correction.
I couldn't agree more.
Just going to ask that about preconditions. What are the preconditions for error correction? Because it occurs to me that intellectual humility would have to be one of them, right?
Oh, you mean like the attitudinal dispositions?
Yeah. What are the? I mean,
I think you're right. You're right. So there are personal dispositions that are required, and perhaps they can be inculcated in young people, but there are also cultural conditions, which is what I'm drawing attention to.
Yeah, and I was thinking, it's funny, we're all thinking different ways, because I was thinking like institutional conditions, but I was thinking about the imam who is totally on board, like, yeah, I want to correct my hermeneutics of the text, my interpretation of the text, but I'm not willing to even consider whether or not, you know, certain propositions about Muhammad. I'm not even willing to consider that. So I guess the principal one is everything has to be on the table. And you can say, yes, I'm all for error correction, except it's like what Tyron Lannister said, nothing matters if it comes, nothing after the but matters.
Right.
You know, it's like, there is no except. There's like, yes or no. I'm for error correction,
Popper would say there is one except.
Oh, and that's the thing.
So exactly. The paradox of tolerance. So what we shouldn't be able to question is the necessity to be able to question.
Well, you would need that as a condition to engage in the first place. So, yeah, I mean, again, I think that we will gain far more purchase talking about free speech if we don't talk about free speech. We don't really even need to talk about free speech. In fact, when we were in France, we went in the slums, we were explicitly told, do not talk about free speech. And then you have everything on the left who's going completely insane right now, who thinks that free speech is some kind of right-wing Nazi dog whistle. No, okay.
If people like Fuentes and Tucker Carlson get their way, the left might rediscover free speech.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how that works? That's amazing. But we can not deal with any of it. We can just talk about error correction.
So maybe Free Speech Union needs to change its name to the Error Correction Union.
The Error Correction.
It doesn't have quite the same.
There's a suggestion that will leave people to think about that. Peter Boghossian, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a superb conversation.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Steph.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mike.